We're going to begin the Louisiana Board of Elementary and Secondary Education meeting. At this time, I'd like to have everybody, almost. Sorry. Okay, this time, I'd like to call the Louisiana Board of Elementary and Secondary Education board meeting to order. May I have a roll call?
Ms. Beebe? Present. Ms. Beebe is present. Mr. Bennett?
Here.
Mr. Bennett is present. Ms. Bothie?
Here.
Ms. Bothie is present. Ms. Bradford?
Here.
Ms. Bradford is present. Ms. Astug?
Present.
Ms. Astug is present. Mr. Garvey? Mr. Garvey is absent. Mr. Guillo?
Present.
Mr. Guillo is present. Ms. Hill?
Present.
Ms. Hill is present. Mr. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Lee is present. Ms. Orange-Jones?
Present.
Ms. Orange-Jones is present. Mr. Romer?
Here.
Mr. Romer is present. You have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you. The next item is the invocation, which will be given by Mary Hale, and then followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by David Haynes. And I'd like to note that both students or former students of our BESE, staff member Bridget Devlin. Please stand.
Will you please bow your heads? Heavenly Father, we pray that you will give us your gift of knowledge, that we might always make the best decisions for the good of all the school children in Louisiana. We pray that you will give us the wisdom to know and define our tasks, the strength to build and refine our educational goals, and the courage to persevere as necessary. We ask for your direction that we might make unselfish decisions for those we serve. We pray that all who are assembled here have a safe journey home. We thank you for all your past and future blessings. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I failed to mention that both are fifth grade students at Clinton Elementary School in East Feliciana Parish, and they have represented their school and their parish very, very well, and we welcome and thank their family for joining them today. Thank you. Next item.
Next item is approval of the agenda, including emergency agenda items 9, 10, and 11.
So moved.
Okay. Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Bradford, a second by Mr. Lee to approve the agenda. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Item 3, approval of the minutes of December 7th, 2011.
Is there a motion?
I'll move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Romer. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Bennett. Any objection to the motion to approve the minutes, December minutes?
Madam President.
Mr. Guillo.
Please let the record reflect on every curtain.
Not that. Okay. Well. Okay. Would you withdraw at this point? Okay. Okay. So there's a proper motion and second on the floor to approve the December minutes. Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. We'll catch you. Next item.
Next item, actually, there has been a request to take item 11 out of order.
Okay. We actually, Ms. Pazance, we were going to do that following the State Superintendent of Education report.
Okay.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. So,
so item number 4, report by the State Superintendent of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Good morning to all board members. It's an honor to address you in the superintendent's report for the first time as state superintendent. In thinking about our mission to ensure that all kids are on track to college and career and ready to graduate from college or attain a professional career, I know that we have to facilitate solutions that ensure that our students and our schools are able to move toward those outcomes. And I think, as was stated yesterday, it is critical that first and foremost our responsibilities be toward supporting our educators and our schools in their attainment of that objective, supporting the people on the front lines of the work day to day in spite of being in this enclave here in the Claiborne building. We talked a little bit about this morning, but I have come immediately to see that one of the department's first focuses, and certainly one of mine, must be, as we continue to erect the right policy framework, getting out of the way of educators across the state and removing bureaucratic processes that do not have any contribution toward the achievement of our students. I literally believe, and have heard from dozens of educators across the state, that the removal of these processes will add to the lives of our educators their most precious commodity, which, as you know, for those of you who have been teachers and parents, is time. My own experience as a local superintendent, along with discussions I've had with dozens of superintendents, many in the last couple of days, lead me to conclude that in spite of all best intentions, or in part because of all best intentions, the department and certainly the federal government has distributed information in a way, and sometimes even created regulations in a way, that are time-consuming and that are confusing for district staff. One example of this is the voluminous, complex package of emails that districts receive on a daily basis, that district superintendents then distribute to various officials within their organizations, that they then distribute to principals, creating what I would imagine to be hundreds of hours of work on a week-to-week basis, and making it extremely difficult for district officials to determine what the state says is important and what that the state is saying is not critical to student achievement. To address this issue, yesterday we announced a new consolidated communications policy to our superintendents. Effective immediately, districts will receive only 2 emails per week from the agency. These communications, which will be forwarded from my office, led by Vicki Thomas, will replace the multiple mass emails that go out each day to superintendents and other leaders within school districts on issues such as assessment schedules, professional development, and requests for forms and policies. A corresponding policy has been put in place for charter schools, which get the triple whammy of being regulated not just by the state as an LEA, but also by the OPO office as an authorized charter, and also by the RSD as a school district school, literally receiving sometimes the same message 3 times from 3 different offices and oftentimes 3 different people. Every one of our single children can attain a college degree or a professional career, but getting them there takes relentlessness, and the first piece of that has to be focusing our district and our school leaders on student learning by breaking away from bureaucracy. We have to, plainly put, do more listening than we do talking at the department, and I hope this first step is one way toward getting there. Another step is that I will begin my listening, or continue my listening, by doing visits across the state starting next week, when I will be spending 4 out of 5 days in districts with our principals, with our superintendents, with business leaders, with community leaders. Of course, I hope that as many of you are able to attend in your district will attend some of those events. And I'll be continuing that over the next several months, and certainly on into my term, to make sure that, as all good teachers do, we continue to do more listening, more asking questions than telling and talking. I hope that this state provides me an opportunity to do that. We'll be particularly focusing on schools that are employing innovative strategies and demonstrating that proven reforms can successfully be implemented with urgency. We can get kids through college to a professional career, even in the most challenging circumstances. And we'll really be exploring what has worked, what hasn't worked, how we can refine our policies, how we can be listening to what schools and school districts truly need to implement programs that are of real value to the lives of students on a day-to-day basis. I'm looking forward to these visits. I'm looking forward to sharing with you, with our educators and with the public, what it is that we learn from these visits. And in the meantime, I'm grateful for the opportunity to report to you this morning. Madam Chairman, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. If the room, we had superintendents in the audience, I expect there would have been a round of applause at the idea that they would receive on your idea around communications. I think again, that's an excellent example of something that you experienced as a district superintendent that hindered your ability and that slowed you down, and to offer that relief to districts, I think is important. Mr. Lee, you agree?
Absolutely. I receive over 150 emails a day, not all from the department, but it's very time consuming, and anything that can be done to communicate but not so much. I think it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you. At this point, Ms. Posnack alluded to, we've been asked to take an item out of order. Board members, Ms. Posnack will read this item. It's coming from the emergency agenda, item number 11. We'll get a motion and a second on the floor. I'll ask the superintendent to speak to that motion, and then we'll entertain board member comments. So, sorry?
I make the motion.
To move the item off the emergency agenda by Ms. Bradford. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lee. This item has been moved out of order.
I'd like to speak to it.
Let me get the motion on the floor, and then I'll recognize you. Ms. Posnack, I'm ready for you.
Item 11, consideration of granting the State Superintendent of Education authority to appoint a recovery school district superintendent.
Okay, so that's the motion. Is there? That's the item. Is there a motion?
I move that the board grant the State Superintendent of Education authority to appoint Patrick Dobart as Superintendent of the Recovery School District.
Thank you. I have a motion. Is there a second? I have a motion by Ms. Orange-Jones, a second by Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. I want to support the motion. I think that this is a very wise choice for that position. I've worked with Mr. Dobart for a number of years, particularly here in the State Department of Education, where he has chaired some very diverse groups of people, including legislators and educators and business people. He handles himself extremely well. Even difficult people like myself, he permits people to express themselves, but yet he maintains a friendly atmosphere, and he doesn't waver from the agenda. And that takes a unique ability to communicate. He's had a vast background of experience working with all the different agencies, a number of years in public education. I just think he's the right fit for that position. And this I shouldn't say, but I will. I told Mr. White that it took some innovative work, but we finally freed that position up so that we could put Patrick as RSD superintendent. But I truly think that's a movement, and that's good. And if your other appointments are half as good as this one, I think we'll see good things happen.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Ms. Bradford?
I just want to echo those sentiments. I just don't think we could have a better candidate, and so we're very excited about this new era going forth in RSD, and we're very grateful to John White and his leadership in making this appointment.
Thank you. Ms. Beebe?
And in fact, I don't know if Mr. Dobart is in the audience.
He is.
Okay, well, Mr. Dobart, I want to say my comments are not intended to be personal, okay? But I am a personnel director in the St. Martin Parish School System, and I will repeat what I said to Mr. White's appointment. We have a bulletin 746, which outlines the certification requirements for an educational leader. Mr. Dobart, I will ask Mr. White, and in fact you did communicate to me, you did outline his credentials. The big question, and I want to ask it publicly, does Mr. Dobart meet ed leader credentials? I can answer that question. He doesn't. He doesn't meet established criteria. And once again, I think this is sending the wrong message out to not only the educators of this state, but to our children. And as I said, it's not even, in fact, I've been observing Mr. Dobart on occasion, and I'm sure he is a wonderful person. But we talk about standards, and these credentials outlined in the bulletin are standards of measure, so that we can, in good faith, be responsible. Now, yesterday, we had committees that we had to take action on requests for waivers due to individuals not meeting certification requirements. We denied the waiver request. And my contention is, if we're going to deny waivers for some and accept waivers for others, then let's burn Bulletin 746. I am angry today because when I see the injustices happening at this level, we are the BESE board, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, but yet we are going to be identified as a waiver board. We're the waiver board. Now, either we decide, I hear some of you, Mr. Romer, you mentioned we need standards. Well, I agree, but we can't use them one day and the next day say they're not applicable. So I feel that we need to adhere to the standards. In fact, to quote one principal who contacted me last night, he asked, Miss Beebe, where is the line? I said, excuse me, which line? Where do I go? I want to stand in line to kiss the ring so I can be considered for some of these top leadership positions. I have my credentials, but I am not even being afforded the opportunity to apply. So we need to get our act together, ladies and gentlemen of BESE, to either decide whether we maintain Bulletin 746 or we burn it.
Do you have it?
Do you want me to?
Yes. Are you finished, Ms. Beebe?
I'm finished.
Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Superintendent White.
Perhaps, Madam Chairman, I could use this opportunity
Yes.
just to issue my comments in part in response to Ms. Beebe, but probably more important to articulate why Patrick Dobard is the absolute right candidate to run the Recovery School District. I think it's probably worth saying that Ms. Beebe, you as a director in a parish school system, are reading a set of requirements for parish school system superintendents that you perhaps then did not read the rules around the Recovery School District superintendent, which actually are different, and the requirements for parish superintendent are actually not the same requirements. So I urge you to actually go back and perhaps do the legal research on that question. We're happy to provide it.
No, Ms. Beebe,
We're happy to provide
you were
it.
given the opportunity to speak. Is Superintendent White?
We're happy to provide it, but I do want to clarify for the board.
Ms. Beebe, you're out of order.
I do want to clarify for the board that because the Recovery School District superintendent requirements are different, that actually the statement that he does not meet the qualifications is incorrect. However, we shouldn't be debating if it's about students and the welfare of students, the question of whether some rule in some book makes Patrick Dobard the right person or not. He is, by universal measures, the absolute right person for the Recovery School District. And I've known that really since the minute that I met him, which was unfortunately much later after most of you met Patrick, because you've had the opportunity, many of you, to work with him for multiple years. The thing that I met Patrick at a coffee house when I was first coming to work in New Orleans, and I understood that he did work in the legislative side of state government. And typically, people have a kind of political mindset about the world when that's their line of work. And the thing that jumped out immediately about Patrick is that while intellectually he has the sophistication to understand that fast-moving world, he is morally principled and grounded in a way that is steadfast and in a way that ensures that any child in whose care or in his care is guaranteed to be assured the greatest protections and the greatest services that we can possibly provide him. Patrick is first and foremost about students and about children above all else. He served this department as the liaison to the state legislature for Superintendent Pastorak, along with Speaker Salter. He also served as the special assistant to the superintendent on a host of issues, including working directly with the Recovery School District as a liaison. And he worked with Dr. Norton in the assessment division for years, giving him a grounding in curriculum. But that view of curriculum assessment and instruction was born of 11 years of experience as a classroom educator and additional years of experience as a nonprofit organization leader in Louisiana public schools, rural public schools, urban public schools, always working with the most challenged youth that our state has. And I have yet to meet anyone who's known Patrick across this state who doesn't speak of him in literally glowing terms. He's a native New Orleanian. He has a master's and a bachelor's in education and bachelor's in education from Southern. And for the last 9 months, he has served as deputy superintendent in the Recovery School District. In fact, it was my first decision as superintendent of the Recovery School District to make Patrick my deputy. I know, much to the quiet dismay of many of you here, but in the end, the right decision. And the right decision because Patrick then led a 100 days process that took community feedback to begin the formation of a strategy to ensure that our district of autonomous and independent schools would sustain its progress toward excellence, its belief in equity, and to renew our faith in community. And if I were to say what Patrick has overall accomplished in New Orleans, clearly we have our challenges. We have them academically, we have them in terms of equity, we have them in terms of community. But Patrick really has served as the living embodiment day to day of the idea that you can be relentless about excellence, you can be fair to the needs of every child, but you can make change in a way that still respects the people of our community on a day-to-day basis. The work ahead is incredibly critical. We have an enrollment system to design and build. We have low-performing high schools that we need to redesign. We have an equity report accountability system that needs to be designed and released. And we have the state's highest progress school system where the lives of tens of thousands of kids hang in the balance. So the trust that I'm asking that you place in me to make this decision today is not one that I ask you take lightly. And it is one that I hope you understand I come to you with the utmost confidence that I have brought you the #1 candidate, not in New Orleans, not in Louisiana, but in our entire country to lead the Recovery School District. Thus my endorsement and nomination of Patrick Dobard, and I thank you for consideration of granting me the authority to do so.
Thank you, Superintendent White. Mr. Romer.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Madam Chairman. I'd too like to echo the sentiment that Patrick Dobard is the right candidate for this job. And we can talk about credentials and handbooks and bulletins, and to me those are irrelevant. We can burn them as far as I'm concerned. We talked about it earlier today, the idea of allowing more flexibility to districts to meet the challenges that are particular to those districts. And in fact, we've granted this waiver to other districts when they had superintendent candidates. But in this instance, Patrick actually meets the RSD credentials as well, which makes it even better. But, you know, I look at this district in particular, and it is a very unique district. It is a district primarily of independent schools. And the greatest challenge when you have a conglomeration of independent schools is communication. And Patrick Dobard, probably more than anyone I've worked with in the department and then in the RSD, has tremendous communication skills across party lines, across gender, across race, and he often, not often, he always puts the children first and the outcomes and holds himself and others to high standards. And so I would think the critical issue here is leadership. What we need in this state is leadership, quality leadership in as many positions as we can get. Patrick Dobard has proven to be a quality leader. I could care what the handbook describes. It makes no difference to me. Never has, never will. The handbook ought to be burned, along with a lot of other rules and bureaucratic nonsense that have gotten our schools in the position that they're in today, where 44% of them are D's or F's. Well, we've been following the handbook for 50 years, and I'd say the outcomes haven't been that good. So throw the handbook away. Finally, I'd make this point. There is a great deal of accountability in this position, and a great deal of accountability that will fall on the shoulders of this superintendent. And this state superintendent has the authority to choose who he wishes to run the RSD. And guess who will be held accountable for that? This state superintendent will be held accountable. And how can I tell him who his assistant should be when in return I'm going to judge this superintendent on the outcomes? I need to give him the flexibility to put in position the person he feels will be effective. And we will hold John White, the state superintendent, accountable for the RSD outcomes. I couldn't speak more highly of Patrick Dobard. He's a great father. He's a great leader, a great communicator. He'll have many challenges, and I'm certain he will have bumps in the road. He's had bumps in the road in the past. He has dealt with some very sensitive legislation. He's dealt with a state superintendent prior to this who, quite frankly, caused quite a bit of combustion in the room. And Patrick Dobard handled it with grace and sophistication and great skills. It's called leadership, and we need leadership in this state. And I appreciate Patrick being willing to take this position. Patrick is a strong family man. and it will require sacrifice of him and his family for him to do this. I appreciate you doing it, Mr. Dobar. I wish you luck. I wish you great outcomes, and I want to support the superintendent in his decision.
Thank you, Mr. Romer. Anyone else want to speak? Ms. Beebe, I'm going to, after everyone has had their first opportunity, I will go back and recognize you first. Would anyone else on the board like to speak to this motion? Ms. Beebe.
Okay, and I want to reiterate to Mr. Dobar, it's not anything personal. It's a process, and the process is lacking today. And I believe once we hear, I did hear you, Mr. Ramos, said burn the bulletin. Okay, if we're not going to adhere to the bulletin, Mr. White, I would ask that you authorize all districts, when it comes time to making selections for top leadership positions, let's say we don't have to adhere to those. But I go back to my decision yesterday when we denied the waiver request for 4 individuals. I am a person I believe in being consistent, and I believe in having fair and equitable process. We're denying individuals the opportunity to apply the equal employment opportunity. That is not taking place in Louisiana today. We are a dictatorship today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Beebe. I think everyone's had a chance to speak, so I just would, I'm going to comment, and it echoes what Mr. Romer said, is that the state superintendent clearly has the authority to appoint the recovery school district superintendent. The board has a role in that, but we will be holding, the board hires 2 people and evaluates and holds 2 people accountable, and that's the state superintendent of education and the executive director of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. I do support the motion on the floor. I had the pleasure of working alongside and with Patrick Dobard for the past 8 years, and I've watched him grow. I've watched him assume new tasks and new challenges, and complete those with, very, very well. I don't know what it is, what's out there that he cannot do, and that is the very talent and leadership that the superintendent has recognized in Mr. Dobard. And the fact that he is here today with this recommendation speaks volumes of Mr. Dobard. Is there any other comments on the motion on the floor? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Please record Ms. Beebe as being opposed to the motion. Next item.
Item 5.1, Board Committee Reports, the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee. Ms. Bradford.
Madam Chair, the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee met, and recommend that approval of items 1 through 15, noting that items 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 are notices of intent.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Bradford, a second by Mr. Lee, to approve the minutes, noting the notices of intent. Are there any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Item 5.2, Administration and Finance Committee. Mr. Romer.
Yes, on behalf of the Administration and Finance Committee, I move approval of items 1 through 40, and 39 being notice of intent.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the, is there a motion on the floor? Is there a second? Second by Ms. Bradford. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Guillo.
Madam President, please let the record reflect that I have recused myself from voting on items 17 to 34.
Okay, items 17 through 34, Mr. Guillo has recused himself. Okay, that completes that item.
Item 5.3, Committee of the Whole, RSD Matters Only, Administration and Finance Committee. Mr. Romer.
On behalf of the Committee of the Whole, Administration and Finance Committee, I move approval of item 1.
Okay, the motion to approve the RSD Finance Committee minutes, is there, from December, is there a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Lee. Any objection to the motion? Motion carries.
Item 5.4, Committee of the Whole, RSD Matters Only, School Innovation and Turnaround Committee. Mr. Romer.
You know, I run all these committees. This is good. On behalf of the School Innovation, Committee of the Whole School Innovation Turnaround Committee, I move for approval of items 1 through 3.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Bradford. Any objection to the motion? Motion's approved.
Item 5.5, Educator Effectiveness Committee. Mr. Lee.
On behalf of the Educator Effectiveness Committee, I move approval of items 1 through 5, noting that item 5 is notice of intent.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Lee. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Romer. Second, there's a second on the, there's a proper motion on the floor. Is there any objection? Motion carries.
Item 5.6, School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, Mr. Romer.
Mr. Lee, if you'd quit interrupting me when I'm trying to do business here, I appreciate it. On behalf of the School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, I move approval of item 1 through 13, and I will say that item 14 has been requested to be pulled. So right now, I'm moving for approval of items 1 through 13.
Okay, let's go ahead and dispense with that part of the minutes. Is there a second? To approve items 1 through 13, meaning that we'll pull and read item 14. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Hill. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Mr. Romer, would you please read item number 14?
Certainly. Item 14, on motion of Ms. Dastug, seconded by Mr. Bennett, the School Innovation Turnaround Committee recommends that the Board approve as notice of intent revisions to Bulletin 111, the Louisiana School District and State Accountability System, Section 2403. Transfer of schools out of the Recovery School District, and Bulletin 129, the Recovery School District, Section 505. Return of schools to LEA.
Thank you. At this point, would anyone like to speak to this item? Ms. Orange-Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I would like to speak to the item. I just want more information. I know we began a conversation as a board yesterday to begin to understand some of the complexities that exist with this process, and I know that Ms. Bradford was able to make a motion to basically revisit this, requesting more information from the LDE and basically to better understand the law involved in this process. I would just like to recognize that while I too second that motion, the time frame on that is so far down the line that I'm concerned that because we have a pressing and immediate situation with this particular school now, I want to be sure that I'm able to raise the question, what needs to happen now, and is there a role for the board in helping to facilitate that process? I wanted to open up the discussion to be able to gain clarity.
Okay, those are two very important questions, and Superintendent White, are you prepared to respond?
I'm happy to.
Okay.
There are two separate problems, and just to make sure that I'm going to restate it, Ms. Orange-Jones, so that you can tell me if I'm getting this right. On one hand, there is a current policy in the regulations about how a school is to return from the Recovery School District to the original district, and that policy is being clarified here, so the terms around issues like, is it after 5 years or is it during the 5th year, that the regulation can be clearer. 8 schools were in that position this year, and it was clear from each of those that the policy needed to be clearer. That's the item in front of the board. And I believe we have some who will speak to this item today. As a result of this policy change, the issue of schools returning has been raised. Most schools petitioned, or in fact all 8 schools petitioned the BESE board to say, per the policy, this is what we want this year. And what has happened in the instance of one of them, Martin Berman Elementary in Algiers, is that though some affiliated with the school, teachers, parents, local community members, have said, we want to return to Orleans Parish, when the board of the school has said they have given you, the BESE board, a disposition that they stay with the Recovery School District. And what I would urge the board is to acknowledge that we have a policy in place. That policy needs to be clarified. If then on a second directive to the department, you would like us to revisit the question of how parental concerns and so on are voiced within this process, we are more than happy to do so. But there is a distinction between what's being brought regarding the policy and this specific circumstance regarding this school. And I want to be clear, no one is acting outside the bounds of the policy. Community members are voicing their opinion, and the board has issued its disposition to the BESE board.
Okay. Are there any other questions on this item? Any? Ms. Orange-Jones, I'll go to you first.
I appreciate the clarification. I would just urge the board, while we do have representatives here today, that we could just make sure that we actually hear what the fundamental issues are concerning the issue that we
Yes.
will be ultimately looking at down the line.
Well, Madam Chair,
Mr. Romer.
is it appropriate to have a motion on 14
Yes, we
in
can.
place? Do we have a motion? I mean, I move for approval of item 14.
Okay, we can go ahead and get a motion on the floor. That is standard practice. So I'll recognize a motion by Mr. Romer to approve this item as presented. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Bradford. So we've taken care of that. There is a public comment card before us. I'm going to allow some public comment because I think there's some new information in both new individuals. So I've had a conversation with them. We're going to limit it time-wise, but we're going to allow that. But before we do that, any other board members would like to speak on this?
I'd just like to say, as far as the board, as we go forward to look at this policy, that we make sure that when we're looking at the policies and we look at the local policies for our local school districts, is that if we state one thing in the policy as far as making sure that schools are able to return back to their district, but making sure that the local boards are held accountable as far as, I know we have to make sure that they have a plan in place before the school is able to return back to their local districts. I want to make sure that we have a communication with the local board and the charter governing board to make sure that everyone is on one accord. For example, in a situation like this school, that they have met all the requirements, but what's hindering them is that the local school board didn't have a plan in place for them to return back to the local district. So that's something that I'd like for us to look at closely as when we're making policies.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hill. I think the department and the superintendent will take note of your request. Any other comments on this item? Ms. Beebe.
Ms. Baxter, the timeline, I understand with this group, if they are approved to return to the Orleans Parish School Board, what is the timeline? Do they have time, or what is the process? Do they make application, Mr. White?
The regulations spell out a process. It also spells out a timeline. The previous board had actually already heard the issue of schools returning, and they had basically said, let's extend this issue of the report on schools returning to January. So this, in essence, this cycle of schools returning, school boards saying to the BESE board, this is what our decision is, has already passed. The law spells out, or the regs spell out the timing on that policy. So there is no decision in front of this board about whether or not a school should return to the Orleans Parish School Board. The policy is in place. The schools have adhered to the policy, and the schools have said that our disposition is to remain within the recovery school district. So today you are simply being asked to make changes that clarify some language within that policy. As a response to that, and in part because of that, some members of our community in New Orleans have come here today to voice that on a decision that was made by the board of one school, they disagree with that decision. I believe that is what will be said. And however, that does not mean that there's a decision about that school in front of you today. If you want to instruct the department or ask the department to go back and revisit its policy in a way that would, in the future, change this kind of dynamic, we are more than happy to take a look at that, absolutely. But currently, the board of the school is the one that has the authority within the law to make the recommendation. They've already made the recommendation.
So if we initiate a policy change, what impact will it have?
Well, from my understanding, and somebody correct me, the most significant change in the policy before you that you're approving today is to clarify that a school can elect annually whether it chooses to remain in the recovery school district or to return to the LEA, the traditional school district. So this policy would allow the school board annually to make its decision to whether or not they want to return, in this case, to Orleans Parish School Board. I think what's critical here, I'm not sure people are really, everyone is clued in on this, is that this is a decision not of BESE, it's a decision of the local school board.
But how do we go about changing that authority with regard to that school board to help these individuals who are being held hostage, in my opinion? We need to give them the autonomy. If they choose, we talk about choice. If they want to leave this school district, the recovery school district, then they should have the autonomy to leave.
And they should, and they're, again, the policy and the law, it makes the local school board to be, the governing school board for the school to be that decision maker. That school board has notified the board that they wish to remain in the RSD. Well, the conversation that has come from Ms. Orange-Jones and Ms. Hill is that should we look at policy going forward, which would perhaps impact the school next year if the same situation were to exist, that would allow them to appeal if they could not, convince the school board that it's in the school's best interest. The school board, the governing board, has determined that it's in this school's best interest to remain in the Recovery School District. That's the decision we've received.
So going back to my question,
Okay.
the timeline, what is the timeline? Should they want to return to their school, to Orleans Parish, August
I can't answer it.
2012? How soon do we have to initiate the policy change? Granting them the
They've missed,
authority.
we've extended the timeline.
The regulations already have a timeline in them. That timeline is passed. So you would,
No.
it would be logistically very, very difficult to have
5 to
this year.
6 months to codify BESE policy.
I also
Yeah.
just want to emphasize that I think that this is a policy that has great gravity, and I understand why there is obviously we want to listen to Mr. Hammond today and other commenters about this issue. But the idea of whether we should override a school board, a local charter school board, in their decision as to what district they're governed by is not something that we should take lightly, and that's something that would require much, much work. So I understand people's interest in solving this circumstance and what appears to be an issue, but let's get to work on the policy if that's what the board is interested in us doing, and we can bring back a recommendation as to whether a change is a good thing or not.
Okay. Ms. Bophy, Ms. Bophy, and then Ms. Bradford, and then we'll move on to the public comments.
So I would like to know the pros and cons of looking at that policy, because my concern is that you're going to give an authority to a board to run a school, but then you're going to give the authority to someone else to decide that they can't run that school anymore. So I'd just like a discussion of the pros and cons of even looking at that policy.
I certainly am not saying necessarily that there is any pro to changing the policy. I'm always happy to issue an opinion and to consult with people as to whether or not it remains a good policy now that we've implemented it. And I'm happy to bring back recommendations as to, having done that consultation, if there are any aspects that should be changed. But I'm not for a second suggesting at this time that there are aspects that should be changed.
Okay. And I believe Ms. Bradford addressed that yesterday.
I did. That's
Ms. Bradford.
what I was going to say again, is that really and truly we need some clarification about what our responsibility is and what we have arranged to do, freedom to do. Certainly when we hear passionate pleas of people who care and are working so hard to make it happen, we wish we could do magical things. But unfortunately, we have to work within the constraints of the regulations and the timelines and the regs and laws that we have governing us as well. And so my hope is that we will move quickly on determining what is the latitude that this board has and what is the right course for us to take so that every voice is heard when these decisions are made.
Thank you. And I think technically, Ms. Beebe, the timeline on policy changes, it runs, we've shortened it under Ms. Posniak's leadership, but I think it's still 5 months. Okay. Any other comments, questions by board members? Okay. At this time, I'm going to allow public comment. Mr. Hammond, Henry, Lang, and Rose. Do all 4 of you want to speak? Okay. In that case, I'm going to limit the public comments. Two individuals are going to speak? 4, okay. I'm going to limit the public comments to 2 minutes per individual. Or collectively 10. You decide. I would take the 10.
Good morning.
Good morning. You asked us not to be redundant on the matters coming before you as we spoke on yesterday. My name is Larry Hammond, grandfather and great uncle of students at Martin Barman Elementary School. Volunteer, 4th grade, mentor, tutor. I'm not a teacher, for clarity from yesterday. Under instructions and advice from the board on yesterday, we secured the parents' signatures on 500 and something students at Martin Barman School. We did this based on the original policy, which stated that 5 years, 50% of the staff, 50% of the student, teachers, parents in the community, if they signatured that document and we lived up to the expectations of improvement, which we did, moving from 80 percentile to 107 over a 3-year period, we felt that after yesterday's conversation, it was necessary to bring this information to you. We're not coming here as a teacher's voice or a union voice. We're coming here as a community voice. Secondly, we have letters that were received from OPSB Superintendent Darrell Kilbert on last evening. We received that based on the communication from you guys on yesterday. In terms of the return to the school system, RSD has a responsibility here as well as OPSB or any of the other school systems around the state. When you tell them that you're going to be governed by this policy, you should have a means to support that. And I don't think RSD has done their job in instructing the schools. When you achieve your 5-year goal, you can go back. We do not want to be labeled any longer as a failed school. RSD is a failed school system. That's the understanding of everyone in the community. When you say RSD, you say failure. And we want out of that. And we have done the things required. Now, the policy itself, as written, it's been amended 38 times. But we were working on auspices of the first writing of it, where it said in 5 years, you make the grade, you move on. But you're denying us that opportunity to move on. And as Ms. Beebe, I believe, said, you're holding us hostage. The time frames of January, Mr. White just stated that we have missed a time. We were requesting, they said January was a time when you come before this body to request coming out. But we have passed that time. This is the first group. There's 8 schools that are under this particular success story for this RSD. And the first opportunity you have to move forward with it, you're denying. We're the only group that choose to come out, as far as I know right now. I think you need to consider some form of wavering of that information or that particular policy that's so vague, and give us the opportunity to move forward back into the community as a successful school. Ms. Henry will now speak on this matter as well.
Good morning. For clarity, my name is Tramika Henry. I am not a teacher. I'm not employed by any school district. My only concern, and I'm very passionate about education, are these 2 children. This is my greatest asset. This is why I fight for Berman and every other child whose parent couldn't make it here to have their voices heard. This is the future for myself and for our city. We have met as parents over several months prior to the deadline that you guys said was in December. We have been meeting since, I would say, October or earlier than that, concerning the issue of our school and moving back and moving forward. We, as parents, all signed documents stating that we want to come out identifying ourselves, the number of children we represent, and what our position is as far as the direction that we want our school to go. We would just like to say that we respectfully recognize the BESE board, the Eldridge Charter Board, and we would also like to be respectfully recognized also. We did not have any conversation with the board as far as them asking us as parents what we would like to do. We initiated that conversation at our own school with the board, voicing our opinion months ago, letting them know what our position was for our children. And we have been ignored. When we came and asked if a resolution was sent to the BESE board, we were told no, to come only here to find out that it had in fact already been sent and the decision was made. We do not desire to be labeled with a stigma. We want our children to be successful. Our motto at our school is second to none, we're number one, and we want our children to feel that way. So we just respectfully wish that you would at least consider a waiver or some kind to help our school and other schools that will ultimately be facing the same position that we're in right now. Ms. Lang is going to speak.
My name is Carol Edgar Lang. I am a grandparent of a 6-year-old at Martin Berman Charter School. This is a letter from the Orleans Parish School Board, and it reads, Dear Ms. Destigue, the Orleans Parish School Board is in support of the return of Martin Berman Elementary School under the governing umbrella of Orleans Parish School Board as an independent charter. The Orleans Parish School Board is prepared to coordinate the terms of return with the Berman Charter Board to help facilitate the process. Should you need further information, contact me at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Darrell C. Kilbert, Superintendent. I'd like to tell you that Martin Berman Charter School is a bright and shining star. They create readers. They know about differentiated instruction. They understand how to reach the at-risk child who becomes the at-promised child. Many of the persons in that building are my colleagues. The principal was my colleague in Orleans Parish. Many of the teachers were my colleagues. And they helped us become one of the top 10 schools in Louisiana at William Jacob Fisher Elementary Montessori Signature School. But I want you to know, children are learning and teachers are teaching. It doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank. It doesn't matter who your parents are. If you have a good, excellent teacher, they will make all of the difference in the classroom. And I beg you today to reconsider us going back. Recovery means sick. Berman is no means by sick. It's not recovering. We have overcome. They're in inferior conditions. The teachers take little and they make much. They get up early and they stay late. So come and visit Martin Berman Charter School. Thank you.
Thank you.
And all we're asking is you consider us going back in 2011, 2012, not put us on the back burner and start another year in a recovery school district. That's a failure. We're not failures. You talk about the rules. You said earlier, Mr. Romer, I believe it was, said debating some rules in some book. Well, that's what we're doing today, debating Bulletin 111. We need to make a change. We need to make that change today. And we ask you guys to consider that and make some policy statement to that change.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Thank you, and we appreciate you coming.
Or we could just burn it.
Okay, Ms. Bradford and then Ms. Hill. Do you have a comment or question?
I just have a comment.
Okay.
I'd like to make.
Can we go Ms. Bradford first and then Ms. Hill?
Okay.
I just am going to get a point of clarification from the superintendent. My understanding is that by regulation, by policy, by law, we are not the body that can make a decision to rescind the decision of the governing board
of this school. Am I correct on that?
I'd have to ask Ms. Joan Hunt, but whether the board has the authority to reject the decision by the board of the school, I don't know the specifics of it. Certainly isn't contemplated by the law whether or not the board has the ability to reject that decision. But here's what I would say: the question is that the board would need to affirmatively say, we want to go back, take the school back to Orleans Parish. This is actually not a law about removing the Algiers Charter School Association from its governance of the school. You have two layers of governance in this situation, which is what is making this complex. I certainly don't want to put words in Mr. Hammond's mouth, but what I do read in the letter from Dr. Kilbert, and perhaps I don't want to say he speaks for you either, but is that they should return as an independent charter, which is what I take to mean a voice for support of not only not being within the Recovery School District, but also not being under the auspices of Algiers Charter School Association, which has been contemplated, but it hasn't been an overt part of today's discussion because that's not what this part of the discussion is about. Which is all to say, and this gets to Ms. Hill's point, that also not having been articulated is, if they did return, what do they return to? Are they an LEA? And thus, what's their federal funding structure? What decisions do they have autonomy over according to Orleans Parish, and what don't they have autonomy over? Are they a Type 3? Are they a Type 4? Are they a direct run? Mm-hmm. None of those things have been contemplated, and I suspect that, as with Ms. Hill's comment, actually therein lies the answer to a lot of this, which is that Orleans Parish actually, through the process, has been notified, and I've discussed with them, that they may create a model into which schools return that says, here is your pension obligation, here is your health care obligation, here is how you get special ed payments from the federal government, here's how you get Title I, Title II payments from the federal government, here's what you'll have control over. But this school board is facing a situation where, and all of us, where we don't know what they would actually return to, which is to say that this is all extremely complex. You have the question at a base as to whether or not the school should be in the Recovery School District or not. But then you have the question of, if you were to change that, what would be the role of the charter board? Then you have the role of, if you still have a charter board, what is the new school district, the Orleans Parish School Board, how are they going to govern this school? The school is making progress. If you get any of those decisions wrong, and there's hundreds of them in there, then that risks kids. So I urge you to look at this policy as it currently exists, help us make some modifications so that it's clear, and we will go back and we will evaluate, as Ms. Bofi said, whether there are areas where it should change so as to resolve any issues that might be the result of a community question like this. But the reality is that it is up to boards to consult with their school communities on issues of finances and governance, which is what this is.
Which goes back to another question that I had.
Sure, Ms. Bradford.
For you all. Did you meet with your board? Did you present them with the petitions, with the names? Did you get an opportunity to have feedback with them? To me, that was where the discussions and the decisions really maybe went awry.
We went to the last board meeting, and it was indicated in letter that there was a resolution made pertaining to this very subject. And at that board meeting, we, and everyone in there, did not hear a resolution being proposed by the Algiers Charter Superintendent to that board. But yet, we come and find that there is a resolution that was submitted to you guys. And I'm saying that to say that they're not dealing from the same deck of cards that we're dealing from. We were not apprised that there was a resolution. So we asked the question, where is the resolution? And when did it happen? Well, it happened at the board meeting on such and such a date. Where are the minutes to show that? So we're not dealing with a fair group of persons at the board.
Ms. Bradford and board members, we do have a public comment card from Andrea Thomas Reynolds with the Algiers Charter School, so she might be able to help answer that. Ms. Bradford.
You said on signatures, I just want to clarify something. 50% of your total parent population signed that. 50%. of the total parents?
Actually, we have, yes. And we also, since it was more than 50% of the parent population, we also asked the parents to put down the number of children that were represented, and it's a total of more than 600 children. We have only about 680 kids in our school.
That was just a point of clarification.
No,
for
I know.
me, but
Thank you. I appreciate
that.
it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hill?
I'd like to make a motion to see if we can reconsider, because to my understanding, when you think of the Recovery School District, the purpose is to take a school that is failing, but once they become successful, to allow them to go back to their local district. So I was wondering if we can do more investigation on this particular issue, to study more, get more information from the department in reference to the school and the governing body of the charter school, so we can help this school move forward. And because we understand now they can't, to our understanding, Mr. John Wright, correct me if I'm wrong, that they have already been denied to enter into the new upcoming school year, correct?
The board has already affirmatively chosen to stay in the Recovery School District.
Okay, so can we do a study or an investigation as a board to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do as a board and together, because the purpose of us being here is to make right choices for our children. And if we come up with policies and the schools and the parents and the children and teachers are following those policies, we should give them the right to do what's right and let them go back to where they belong. So that's just my
Thank you, Ms. Hill. You framed that in the form of a motion. There was a referral yesterday that captures what you're asking for. So if we can have another motion on that, if you feel that way, you need a second. Okay. Well, wait. I have an open motion on the floor. I'm going to have to say, would you like to withdraw your motion? Or would you then, is there a second to Ms. Hill's motion? The motion fails for lack of a second. Ms. Beebe.
So I'd like to offer a motion that we allow this group, we deviate from policies and standards don't matter. Deviate from policy and allow this group to go to enter or have discussions with the Orleans Parish School Board and go back where they want to go.
Okay. So there's a motion on the floor. I'm going to assume that board members understand Ms. Beebe's motion. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Ms. Hill. Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion to that motion?
I would say the motion's out of order. That was not the agenda item to be considered today. I'm sympathetic to their position and told them, in fact, we would look at the policy. But there have been a number of people not here in this room that decision would affect. They weren't notified that, in fact, we would be making that consideration, and it's not on the agenda. The return of this school to the Recovery School District is not the agenda item. And it's
We weren't notified that you would send a resolution that we were staying.
This is a different motion. Okay, so the challenge to the motion on the floor is that it is not specific to the item.
Look, I'm sympathetic to your position, and I've told you the policy should be reviewed to make sure with the superintendent are the ways that the policy should be improved. But the implications of this decision, I mean, they are far-reaching, and it's out of order. And it should not be taken lighthearted, and it should not be considered on a whim, having not been on the agenda and without the proper homework being done. That's why we have an agenda, and that's why the motion is out of order.
Mr. Romer, I have this item is out of order. The motion is not germane to the item before us today. The chair will rule that the motion is out of order in agreement with your comments. So the motion dies. Yeah, I've been advised that we can't move on that motion. So, okay, so we go. We have one more public comment card, and that's Andrea Thomas Reynolds with the Algiers Charter School Association. To be consistent, we're asking for 2 minutes, please.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I'd first like to agree with my colleagues and parents and community that Berman has done a fantastic job. The issue is not about the teachers, it's not about the school. What we have been trying to do at the Algiers Charter Schools Association is work with the Orleans Parish School Board and understanding what does this transfer policy looks like. We've not been successful with doing that. We've not received any information from the Orleans Parish School Board relative to that. We've not even seen the letter that you're referencing from Superintendent Kilbert. I would like to backtrack for two things. One, we did receive information from Berman parents, but it was in regard to TRSL. We've not seen any of this information that's being presented. There were two meetings where this issue was discussed. The first was December the 8th, where we presented it, and then there was another meeting on December 29th. More importantly, we have relied upon the school leader, who's also stated that she did not want to return, and that was not the purview of the school. We're shocked by this, but we understand the discontent. However, from the board's governance position, it is that we want to understand what that transfer will look like with OPSB, and not knowing that by the date, the board opted to remain with RSD.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Romer.
I would like to encourage you. I don't believe it's good business, quite frankly, to, well, let me state it another way. I think it's very good business to make sure you have proper input from your parents. And I would encourage that. And this policy, what you asked to do, was not under consideration today. But it does highlight an issue that we need to look at and pay attention to. Now, there's some unique circumstances here that you've outlined. You've not been given, there is some give and take from a number of different parties here. And those parties haven't met their obligation. For this school to agree to go back to Orleans Parish School Board, they need to have been given a very thorough understanding of what those rules of engagement would be. They've not been given that. And we had a timeline in place so that could happen. Didn't happen. So I, too, as a board member if I were a board member of that charter school, would say, I'm not willing to say I'm ready to go back to you without knowing what the rules of engagement are. However, that's one issue. Second issue is involvement of the parents. And I would encourage you, as we look at these issues, and we discuss it with Orleans Parish and others, I would encourage you to work with the Parents Association. I'm assuming you all are a Parents Association. And make sure the communication as well. But I know it's a complicated issue, so that would be my only input.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other board member comments? Otherwise, Mr. Lee.
I'd like to know if the communication occurs, are you willing to give up the school?
Speaking on behalf of the Algiers Charter Schools Board, I don't believe that they are.
See, that's what I see as the real root of the problem.
And the rationale behind that is just, and I'll have my counsel here, I think the rationale behind that is just not understanding what that looks like with Orleans Parish School Board. We already have a couple of schools that we're working with them now, and there's some challenges with that.
Mr. Lee, if I may, Mr. Lee Reed had submitted a comment card, and I think he can speak on behalf of the board. Am I correct? Okay.
Lee Reed, I'm counsel for ACSA, and Mr. Lee, to that point, I think Superintendent White said it very well earlier as he laid out what the complex issues are in returning, if there was a return to the Orleans Parish School Board. First point is what would that look like? You asked about whether ACSA would be willing to give the school up. I think the first thing that we have, at least what I've heard from the Orleans Parish School Board would be, is that we would welcome any of our schools back in as charter schools, and that ACSA would continue to run it as a charter school within the Orleans Parish School Board district. So we don't know what that'll look like yet, and when you ask the question, are they willing to give it up, there's been great progress made at Berman. The board members are supportive of the school, supportive of the students, teachers, and parents there. But the point of it is what does the governance structure look like, and that's extremely complex. And I think as we've said it today, or as we've heard today, it's extremely hard to imagine how it goes back at this point. But certainly we're always willing, and I know the board is more than willing, to have conversations with anyone, including the Orleans Parish School Board, about what those things would look like. And I represent a number of those schools in Orleans Parish that are RSD schools, and I think all of those schools would have the same comment. We're more than willing to listen and understand what that means, but at this point we don't.
Board members, if I can just clarify our position on this. We've been approached by the Orleans Parish School Board, who has expressed interest in saying, okay, how do we develop a model so that when schools return, this is fiscally, human resources-wise, governance-wise, what would happen to them. But I think it is, frankly, cavalier to address this question without thinking about all of those complexities involved. We want schools to be successful enough to return, and if they want to return, we want them to return. We as an agency have no bias on that question one way or the other. But you can't just say return. It has to be to something. Because if you're not clear about that, then you have no understanding of where the dollars are going to go, who's going to control what, and that needs to happen. So we will be happy to work with the Orleans Parish School Board to assist in the development of a model as they have requested that we do. But I think that is the gating question here. We're not trying to prevent these partners from working together, but there is a kind of unknown sitting in the middle of this room right now, which is what does return look like? As Ms. Hill said, once that question gets rectified, we really don't have much of a difficult discussion. Then it is a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Right now it said, I don't know. So I would encourage the board to help us by cleaning up this regulation, which is the matter at hand, and then after that, we will do the work with Orleans Parish School Board. If you want to direct us, Madam Chairman, to do that, we are happy to do that, to help design a return model that is more fleshed out. In the interim, however, I don't believe it's worth trying to intervene in these parties' dispute, as we really have no standing to do so in the first place.
Madam Chair,
I'm sorry.
I'd like to make that motion that we do ask the RSD, or the superintendent, to follow through with making that model and working out those details for the future and for this school.
Okay, Ms. Bradford has a motion to direct the superintendent and department to come forward with a return model. Is there a second? Second. Okay, second by Ms. Beebe, I think. Any objection to that motion?
Comment.
Mr. Bennett.
Just
Who comments so rarely?
It sounds like I keep hearing complexity, 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 and Orleans talking to this department and these two parties talking. It seems to me that you've got a perfect storm here of a model that needs to be discussed, and I think all four parties, this department, Orleans Parish School Board, and these two groups need to meet together, not necessarily for just this school, but for policy here to come, because this is a typical example of what's going to come before us time and time again. So why not use this model and all four parties to come together to discuss how we can streamline. We talk about getting rid of bureaucracy and red tape. This is it, people. This is it. So people have to have an easy-to-follow mechanism on all sides to follow and understand, and that's what I'm hearing is the problem here. And we have two parties talking to two parties and two over here, but we never mix. That's not going to work. All four need to get together as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not too sure what party the parents play in this, but I'm hearing that they aren't stakeholders in any type of governing structure at this point.
Not at all.
And I think that needs to be discussed also.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Romer.
I would concur with Mr. Bennett and say that, the policy that we're actually considering today is a step to clarify the process, which was uncertain. Schools were uncertain how frequently they could consider this. And the policy before you today says this can be considered annually. So that is a small step in the right direction, but there's obviously work still to be done. I would like to call the question. I think we've had thorough discussion on this. I believe there's a motion on the floor for approving item 14.
And we'll move to that motion as soon as we dispense with Ms. Bradford's motion. All in favor of Ms. Bradford's motion signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We go to the original motion, which is item 14 in the School Improvement and Turnaround Committee minutes made by Mr. Romer. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing none, motion carries.
Ms. Statute, I just want to say
Ms. Bradford.
I want you all to know that we recognize your school as a star. We recognize that you did do the things that we asked you to do, and we're extremely proud of you.
Mr. Superintendent.
I just want to say that I think the congratulations should certainly go to the teachers and parents who are here today at Berman. It should also, by the way, and I know you certainly intended this, Ms. Bennett, go to Algiers Charter School Association, who has done such an extraordinary thing, not just at Berman, but at Walker, at Fisher, at many of the schools that I've had the privilege to be involved in. So I thank them for being here as well.
Okay, I think we've dispensed with that item. We move to the next item.
Item number 6, Board Advisory Council appointments. Board members, there is a appointment behind tab 6.
Move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Romer. Any objection to this to the motion? Motion carries. Next item.
Item number 7, receive the resolution from Washington Parish School Board.
Okay, is there a motion to receive? Thank you, Ms. Bradford. A second by Mr. Gilliam. Any objection to this motion? Motion carries. Next item.
Can I just ask a
Yes.
question?
Mr. Lee.
I'm assuming our receiving does not imply that we're to take any kind of action.
No, this is standard practice for the board. Nothing's changed.
Item number 8, election of board officers.
Okay, is there a motion on this item? Ms. Bradford?
I move that the board approve the following slate of officers for 2012. Penny Dasty, President, Chaz Romer, Vice President, and Jim Garvey, Secretary Treasurer.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Hill. Is there any discussion on the motion? Is there any objection to the motion? Motion carries. I'm sure the officers join me in thanking you for your vote of support, and we will endeavor to serve you well.
Item number 9, receive the resolutions under items 9.1 and 9.2.
Okay, is there a motion to receive? Thank you, Ms. Bradford. Is there a second? Ms. Beebe, Mr. Bennett, any objection to that motion? Motion carries.
Item number 10, approval of the minutes of January 11th, 2012.
Okay, is there a motion on this item?
Move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Second by Mr. Bennett. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion passes.
That concludes the business for this meeting.
Okay, board members, this meeting is now adjourned.